Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today on our webcast. Today we're going to talk about Smart Factory and some of the aspects associated with that. My name is Christian Samuel. Been working for RT for a little less than a year now, but my major experience has been with Rockwell software itself for the previous 6 years, and I focused on information software, and we'll kind of get into that. But the information software is the layer that's defined between the PLCs and the enterprise layer. So it's the software that's in the middle, and that was really what I focused on, being the technical consultant. So I spent a lot of time with customers and sales engineers designing and making sure the architecture was correct, and helping them start implementing their systems to have a good, successful, robust type of real-time system. So here we are today. Who is RT Engineering? Well, we were established in 1972. There's a couple of different aspects, a couple of different divisions of our company. We have distributed products, we have field service, custom automation, control systems, and today, again, we're going to be talking about Smart Factory. A big plus here is that we are a Rockwell recognized systems integrator. So what does that mean? That means that we have a partnership with Rockwell that says we can go ahead and partner with them on projects, and they can actually recommend us to do work at your facility. So we're going to talk about Smart Factory, and Smart Factory itself, nice little gear turning, but really, where is the data, right? When you're in your plant, there's a whole bunch of different places that the data resides. You have process data, you've got corporate databases, you've got, production data, and we also have, where are things located, just simple file repositories. And if we take a look at some of the process data, you're going to have, your pressures, your temperatures, your flows. When you get your PLC programs, I know everybody has it, but they got a folder on a network, and you have a WIP folder, which is the work in progress, and you copy it to that, and you try to do revision control from that. You also may have like a corporate database, which stores recipes, work orders, maybe some lot data, and then you also have metrics. How is my line running? Am I getting enough throughput, uptime, downtime, good parts, bad parts? So when you put that all up in a general sense, you try to say, well, if I have all this data in all these places, how can I visualize it? How can I make informed decisions on them? So what's the biggest problem with process data? Well, at some point you may have a high volume of it. The other one, raw data itself. So when you see the raw data, if you're grabbing every single data point, it's really not a true representation of the process. You may have to filter some of that out, because you're going to have peaks and valleys inside the raw data. SQL Server, it's a great thing. It's a very well-used tool, but unfortunately, the performance degrades over time. The SQL Server works great as it's small, but if anyone out there is a database guy, they'll know that as the SQL Server database grows, so does performance decreases. Another major challenge that you're going to have is you may have different networks in your plant. And what do I mean by that? Well, you may have an Ethernet network with all your corporate computers on, but then down on the plant floor, you may have different networks for the devices themselves. They may be a control net, device net, DH+. We don't have to go through all of them, but I'm sure there's a lot of them out there that you can talk about as far as foundation field bus. And so how do you go ahead and manage that, or how do you connect with all of those different network types, but still gather all the data to make, some informed decisions? So, that's one of the challenges with process data. File versioning challenges. So what does that mean? And I spoke a little bit about it before, that you have these file repositories, right? And again, it's probably could be a hard drive that someone carries around with all the PLC codes, all the config files for the drive, or it may be just a folder that's on the network, and every night the IT guy backs that up, and without any certainty, you say to yourself, okay, well, whatever's up on the network is the latest copy of the code. Well, is it really? Because if you have a few engineers on site and someone decides to sneak in and make a change to it and you don't know about it, well, guess what? you go ahead and download the file that you think is the right version, but now you're starting to overwrite changes. So one of the things that you kind of, the challenge of is like, who did what, when. You don't always know why, but sometimes they just do it. And also, it may be a regulatory standard where, you may be under some sort of a control that says, well, you need to document in change control every modification that you make to your, your processor or your drive or your thing, because ultimately that could affect, your product quality. So data on corporate databases. So in essence, we have these, corporations, they run on them all the time, and SQL Server has been around for a while, but, there may be multiple databases that, house different types of accounting information. There may be shipping information, production data, all of that stuff may actually end up on a corporate database. And so how do you grab all that? How do you take that from the shop floor that they say to the top floor, and from the top floor back down to the shop floor? Because it's a lot easier to say to the enterprise level, hey, I want you to manage all of these recipe parameters. We'll tell you what they want. We're going to put them in the SQL Server, or any type of a server, could be Oracle. But we put it in there, and then when we need it, we're just going to press a button, and I want you to go ahead and download these parameters and make our job a lot easier. So a lot of that stuff is done with a corporate database, and how do you manage that, and how do you go ahead and retrieve data from that if needed? And another big challenge is challenges with OEE. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's a term well used around the industry, and it stands for overall equipment effectiveness. It really means hey, how's my line running? How's my these two bottle lines running, or these 3 lines running, and can we compare them to each other? Why is line 1 better than line 2? Or line 3 is always down for a certain length of time. Do we have a bad sensor? Or it could be why is operator 1 producing much better than operator 2? That type of a comparison. How many parts are we producing per hour? And then if we get an order, if we're producing that many parts per hour, will we be able to fulfill the order required by the customer? So by having the ability to take a look at the OE data, or the challenge of not being able to see it, kind of is very hard for forecasting and trying to understand, how the process is actually running. So the stakeholder concerns, we could run down the list, and I'm sure that, some of these may be interchangeable because you may wear different hats, but the operator, they just want to know what's going on with the machine at the time. The engineer, all they want to know is how can we design it a little bit better? How can we make the, the process a little bit faster? IT has to worry about their stuff. Users on my network, stay off my network. The plant manager, we all know what that is. That's the stays awake at night saying, oh my God, the plant is running, or it's not running, or whatever. And the corporate execs, they just want to be able to say, hey, how are we doing on production? How's our costs? Are we forecasting well? Are we meeting the demands? So what can we do to help alleviate a lot of that pain that we see with the stakeholders all in one? Well, if we could use FactoryTalk. Rockwell Automation has a product, has different products called FactoryTalk. And you hear the word interchanged and used, and oh, it's FactoryTalk, it's FactoryTalk. Well, FactoryTalk has different modules, right? And we're going to get into some of the other pieces of it, but the core of this is the FactoryTalk suite of products that has the ability to go out and process those corporate databases, file versioning, production data, process data, all of that. It has the ability to wrap that up into one nice package and put some sort of a wrap on it that you can look at a report or look at a screen and say, you know what, I can make an intelligent decision based upon what's displayed in front of me. So if we look at the modules, we'll call them modules because they really truly represent a nice little module that you have here. One of the things that we have is that database that's up on the corporate network. Well, how do we get that data from the data from the corporate database down to the PLC? Well, that's where the transaction manager module comes into play. It can go ahead and take a look at a PLC, or someone could hit a button on a screen that says, give me recipe parameters A. It goes up to the corporate database, brings them down and puts it in there. FactoryTalk Metrics, used for OEE production data. Very, very powerful tool. Very, very easy to configure based upon the number of work cells that you have. And again, that don't want to get off in the weeds there, but if you have 10 machines or 10 lines, you can take a look at it, and each one of them is a work cell, and drill down all the way down into it and say, hey, how well is each line performing, per shift or per day or per week? Historian, that processes time series process data. Very, very high powerful. Historian uses the OSI Pi technology. Rockwell and OSI Pi created a partnership back in 2006 to go ahead and integrate their powerful database engine into FactoryTalk. So it's a seamless integration with that. And being out in the out in the trenches, a lot of times, I used to work with SQL all the time, and as I said before, the SQL Server is great when it's small, but as it grows and grows and grows, sometimes years, and the data is not purged or corrected or whatever, you could literally go for lunch, come back, and the data is still loading. With the Historian, the OSI Pi data engine in there, I've literally seen a couple of years' worth of data been brought up in like 6 to 8 seconds. It's amazing the difference in the efficiency and the strength of the Historian server itself. And last one up here that we see is Asset Center. It's used for revision control. This product here, we actually use this here at RT Engineering. We use this for our own projects because we have multiple engineers working on potentially the same project. And one of the things that we don't want to do is overwrite someone's work or who has the latest copy of the code. Not only that, but it's also backed up on a nightly basis on our SQL Server, because that's what Asset Center will sit on. So again, those are the 4 major aspects of the FactoryTalk products, product suites. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, but I wanted to show this to show the 3 different segments of a typical plant architecture. Starting down at the bottom, you're going to have, for the control network, that's going to have your PLCs. You may have an HMI on there, but again, you're going to have a managed Ethernet switch for just the control layer. The next layer up is going to be the information software. Again, that's where we, the wheelhouse, that's what we're talking about right now. And if you see, you'll see the Asset Center server and the Historian server, a few clients hanging off. But then separated up with a firewall is you're going to have the corporate network, the enterprise network. And again, 3 different layers, completely separated, but they still have the ability, using security, to access the data if I need to look at what's going on down at the PLC, down at the lowest level. When the plant manager is sitting up on the enterprise network, they can see all of that data. So take a look at the chart. You'll see a lot of the advantages, what types of things for each module. How's that going to help me out? Transaction Manager is going to help you meet regulatory requirements because that has a bidirectional type of a data logging capability that knows if the data reached its destination, has a tag that says, okay, I reached it and went back. So it's, it's validating the data got there. And I've done a few installations where they've used that in the life sciences industry. So, that's just one example. And, we can take a look at a lot of the other check boxes, but to take a look at, reduce and rejects and scrap, rejects and scrap. Metrics is a very, very good tool for that because you can analyze down to the line level, down to the machine level. Why am I having so many scrap parts on this machine? Is my tooling out of alignment or something else? So, so now we come to the benefits, right? We talked about the challenges. We talked about the solutions, and now what are the benefits for each for each of the stakeholders? That is the ultimate goal, right? The plant manager can now sit in his office and has a big oversight of how the whole entire facility is running. And if he can look and see the efficiency of the plant running well, he's a happy person, or she's a happy person. The corporate exec, they can look down and sit there with their feet up on the desk and say, look at my screen and say, how's my business running today? What's the stock? What's my stock at? Because those are the types of things that would interest the corporate exec. We can keep going right down the list for scheduling and the quality manager, but the operator is the big one, right? Because if the operator can make real-time intelligent decisions to find bottlenecks and troubleshoot problems. I just read that word for word because it's a pretty important statement. You know, to find bottlenecks and troubleshoot problems. If the operator sees that, you know, down the line they're having an issue with a tooling or some sort of a pick and place unit, and it's not apparent to the you know, to the engineer or to someone else, they might be able to say, hey, listen, we can probably, you know, change something this way or that way, or to troubleshoot some problems. You know, why did my machine stop? Oh, I had a hose leak or something like that, or whatever it may be. But the operator is, you know, pretty key in helping out with troubleshooting the problems, just like you would go to the doctor, right? You're the person, you go in, as much information as you can probably give them, the faster you're going to get a cure. So again, so those are the benefits. So the next thing here I want to talk about is a case study that IT Engineering just got done finished doing, and it's a textile manufacturer. They are, name of the company is Bradford Industries, and they are in the converting, coating in the textiles industry. And they approached us because they had a serious information systems problem. They had a single network. Everybody was on the same network. Corporate was there, everyone was there, the PLCs were on there, everybody was on the same network. So one flat network, everybody's flooding the network. The computers, legacy computer hardware, they had individual stations that are approximately 9 years old. Anybody knows that that's, you know, Jurassic, never mind old. The legacy software, they were running older version of U32 software. The data collection, because the network was so poor, unreliable data connection. If the data went down, if the network went down to the data collection system, it wouldn't report, we wouldn't know, there would be no indication, and there would be gaps. And the reporting software, they tried to use an add-on package that just, it didn't work, it wasn't user-friendly, so they ended up just saying, you know what, we're just not going to end up using it. So, you know, those were some of the problems. And how we solved that, how did we really solve that? Well, we put a new managed switch in, that way we could separate the networks. Obviously, we updated the client computer hardware. We bought a brand new rack-mounted server that's going to be in a climate-controlled room. We migrated the View32 software to View SE, which is the latest one, version 7.0. We utilized FactoryTalk Historian SE, again, which will allow us to go ahead and have really robust data collection that has the ability to filter and compress the data, and instead of, you know, collecting every single data point, even though it still has that ability too. Use Vantage Point to create the EPA report that they need in a way that they'll be able to just, with a couple of clicks, using Internet Explorer, they can pull up their report, save it as a PDF, and submit it right to the EPA. Another thing we did was we used VMware Hypervisor. And if anybody knows anything about virtualization, hardware changes all the time. And if anybody's ever built a computer and everything's great and then the computer crashes but that computer is not available, we have to rebuild the computer from start to finish. And a lot of times you may find software that can't run on the new software or the new hardware. So now we put this in a virtual world. And a virtual world is you've got a hard drive, things are stored on there, and when we run that Historian server or we run that the View SE server, it's running in a virtual world. So let's talk about some of the benefits. So some of the benefits of a managed switch was we reduced the network traffic. Instead of everybody trying to get on at once, we were able to separate it and say, okay, only you can go here and you can go here. It also allowed us, corporate, to drill down from the top all the way down to the bottom so they could see the reports. New client operator, the new HMI client computer hardware, 64-bit operating systems, more performance, obviously, because we can use more than 4 gig of RAM. The new rack-mounted server, it was, you know, protected because the other ones were just sitting out in the floor, the plant floor environment, which is very, very hot, by the way. A RAID 5 hard drive configuration, which will protect the data, and which ultimately resulted in a large performance increase of just the historical data portion of it. So some of the benefits of FactoryTalk View SE are it's a scalable architecture to allow for them to expand, because right now we are doing a section of the plant, they're liking it, everything's great, and now we're working on an expansion project to incorporate the entire plant not only for just the HMI portion, but also for their entire reporting system. So VantagePoint is going to grow into this massive reporting engine for them, and it's going to eliminate a series of different clipboards and Excel spreadsheets and row databases, as I call them, that are out there. FactoryTalk is still, and again, it's very robust. It can handle over 100,000 data points per second. It's got its own redundancy built into it that we've configured, so in case one server goes down, the other one picks up and still continues to collect data. Some of the benefits of VantagePoint is that it doesn't take long at all to create a report. You open up Excel, you bring your data in, you create a nice little trend, you publish it, someone opens up Internet Explorer on the other side, and the report is done. And the biggest thing was we were able to provide accurate reports to the EPA. So, and the last thing is with VMware, again, we save money by only having a physical server that's housing 2 operating systems. Instead, you would have had to buy 2 physical servers to do this work. And again, it's hardware independent. So if down the line we're using a Dell for instance, and the Dell seems to not work, and okay, they come up with a new corporate standard of HPs or something like that. If they have the HP server installed, all they have to do is copy the files from one server to the other, start it up, and again, it's hardware independent, so we didn't have to worry about having to rebuild any of the servers. Also, it's an easy way to back up the servers themselves. So why would you want to use RT? Well, again, we're an approved Rockwell integration partner. We've got 5 years experience working with the Rockwell software products. The division that I'm currently leading right now is focusing strictly on the information software, but some of the other capabilities that's in our strength is custom automation and control. We have a UL 508 panel building shop. We have 24-hour service, and we have great relationships with our local distributors to get parts on a very, very timely fashion. So I want to thank you for your time. I hope I didn't go over it and take more than 30 minutes. But if any more of this information is valuable to you, give us a call. 1-800-343-1182 number. Speak to anybody, myself. Again, my name is Christian Samuel with RT Engineering, and hope to hear from you. Thank you.